Hey again, and welcome to another edition of Studio Sessions. Thanks so much for joining me. My name is María-Elisa Heg, and I'm the curatorial fellow here at Houston Center for Contemporary Craft. And for this edition of Studio Sessions, Kirstin Willders has generously allowed us to come and join her in her studio. I'm really excited to talk to you and learn more about your practice today. But before we get into that, let me first just do a little bit of housekeeping. First thing, thanks to Catherine, our curator, and Blaze, who's our Visitor Service Associate General, all-around amazing worker at HCCC, for helping us run our stream and moderate our chat. One of the major components of our studio sessions is, in fact, an audience question and answer portion. So we highly encourage you to chime in the chat throughout the broadcast, asking questions, making observations, anything you want to know, and we'll be getting to those at the end of the broadcast before we sign off. So, upcoming events at HCCC. We are so excited to be open again to the public. So for y'all's information, if you haven't come yet, you are able to come and see us Thursday through Saturday from 10 to 5 p.m. on a reservation basis. So please make sure you go to crafthouston.org to make a reservation, and we'd love to come and see you. So, upcoming, we're still accepting registrations for our eco-printing workshop. That's going to be this Saturday, October the 24th, from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Today, you can register and pick up your materials tomorrow, so go to crafthouston.org and register now. This exciting workshop will be taught by our former resident artist, Molly Kane, who's an amazing fiber artist, and it will be really enjoyable. So highly encourage you guys to pick up a great new craft with Molly. October 31st at 3 o'clock Central, there will be a conversation between our curator, Catherine Hall, and Rachel David, blacksmith and organizer of Metaformation, New Connections in Contemporary Blacksmithing, currently on view in the main gallery. Catherine and Rachel work together to bring this amazing show here to Houston, and it's going to be a really fantastic discussion between the two of them, broadcast live on Facebook, October 31st, 3 p.m. Central. Coming up after that on November 12th at 1, Catherine will be leading us on another session of our craft chats. The November 12th at 1 p.m. Central edition will be a tour of Breaking Tradition, which is on view in our front gallery. So please do make sure that you tune into that as well on Facebook Live on November 12th. Finally, we are still accepting registration for our November 14th Polymer Clay Jewelry Virtual Workshop, which will be running from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Central that day. Make sure you sign up soon. Our polymer clay workshops are always a blast, and everything everybody makes is just really wonderful. So highly encourage you to go sign up for that. You can register for our workshops and learn more about all of our upcoming programs if you go to crafthouston.org under the Events tab. So that's about it for upcoming events. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to y'all Kirstin Willders, and I'm just going to briefly read from her bio. Kirstin is a multidisciplinary artist. Her studio practice encompasses ceramics, glass, hair, light, and a wide variety of other materials we'll be touching on today. She received a BFA in ceramics and a BA in art history from Kent State University, and an MA in Italian Renaissance art history from Syracuse University, and also very recently received her MFA in ceramic art from Alfred, and was a recipient of the 2020 Outstanding Student Achievement Award by the International Sculpture Center. Like a couple of weeks ago, did you not get that? So
Yep.
Congratulations, Kirstin.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for having us here today.
Yeah, thanks, María-Elisa. I'm so glad you're here.
Me too. All right, so just going to kick things off here. I know that the folks watching at home are probably looking around at the wide variety of materials that you do have here in your studio space. And I know from talking to you that you're an avid experimenter and you really have a lot of thoughts about materiality and significance around that. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about, how you came to ceramics and how you've really incorporated a lot of these interesting and new materials and techniques into your ceramic work.
Yeah, definitely. So I came to ceramics in high school. I had a really great ceramics teacher in high school, and my program in high school was a public high school, but offered a lot of really great specific media-based art classes. And so I had sort of taken all of the art classes that I could, and I was really interested in textiles at the time, and sort of the last one that was available was ceramics, and I really didn't want to take it. I thought it was dirty and messy, and I wasn't into it at all. But I took it because it was the only thing left. And once I got into the room and I found the wheel and I started learning the pottery wheel here, that was really it for me. I was completely hooked. It was working on the wheel, something about the repetition and the practice that was required, really keyed into this sort of background in repetitious practice that I had from growing up playing sports. So I really, like, something in that really, really clicked in me. And also that it was like this measurable, I could see myself getting better through that practice and through experimentation and growing and just working in that way. So basically my senior year of high school, that was it for me. Ceramics was it for me. I applied to university as an art history major, and immediately stepped foot on campus, immediately changed my major to ceramics, and have gone in that path ever since. But it's always been sort of a dual exploration with art history and studio ceramics for me. What was the second part of that question?
Well, actually, it's a really interesting segue into the second part, because
Sure.
I feel like, talking to you too, I get a very strong sense of how your material explorations really derive from this place of like studying ceramics and being really focused on material and process in that way, and then this other level of symbolism or meaning that's imbued through your art historical studies.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about how that comes through, these different channels have created these different avenues of exploration for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that in the field, it sort of seems like art history is this very academic pursuit, and you don't, through your art historical studies, you don't really learn about technique or process very much. It's sort of all about what you visually see, or learning the content, the context, the history. But having that studio practice as well brings another element to being able to conduct research, I think. And so art history and studio practice have always been sort of, it's not really appropriate to say they've been going in parallel lines per se, because they very much intersect and weave together. But they're always like this dual or in tandem approach for me. So I think that part of my practice, I bring in a lot of, I'm always thinking about like material histories and symbolism of materials, symbolism of forms, and I'm sort of trying to parse that out as I'm working in the studio, and sort of also conducting this research on the side.
It's really interesting. I feel like watching you in, the studio that we're in right now is known as our fishbowl, because it's the only studio for a resident artist that has a full floor-to-ceiling window in the very front wall of it. So you really have been doing a lot of this research and exploration while we've been closed, but I've been really lucky to kind of see you developing a lot of these ideas and turning them into these finished pieces. So I kind of feel like there is a lot of surface treatment happening. Like specifically, you are creating these vessels, and then you're coating them with all manner of different material. And I feel like I'm interested in knowing more about how you've approached that process and why you started coating, like really fully. And we'll get to see more in a little bit, but fully coating some of these pieces of yours in these materials and completely transforming them visually.
Sure, yeah. So I do a lot of cold finishes, and that's sort of what you're saying when you're saying coating the surfaces. So I call it cold finishing, which in terms of ceramics just basically means that I'm not firing the surface onto the ceramic piece. So I will create a piece or design a piece and build it, whatnot, and then generally. Here in Houston, I've been working a little bit faster and sort of working more holistically on individual pieces at a time. In the past, I've sort of built this whole body of like bisqueware, and then proceeded on to surface treatment. But what's nice here is I can sort of dwell on individual pieces a little bit more. And so the surface treatments that I've developed, I was not doing any kind of cold treatment before about 2 years ago. I was always glazing. But I was also making very different work. I was making more or less functional pottery, and so I'm still, in my work now, I'm still using the language of functional pottery, or using the language of creating pieces on the wheel to then assemble or alter and assemble, etc. but I'm moving away from more like traditional methods of finishing a pot. So glazing, wood firing, things like that.
So effectively, like the things that would make a functional piece of ceramic ware, for instance, food safe.
Yeah.
That is kind of taking the functional form and then rendering it non-functional through cold finishing. Is that the term?
Yeah. I say cold finishing. But when I got into grad school, and it's sort of, this has been a trend for a number of years in the contemporary ceramics world, that it's very like, what's in trend right now is very like, I say truth to materials. That might be a little bit of like an out-of-date term or a misnomer at this point, but it's these glazed surfaces that are very like gooey, and like materiality is like a big concern. And so I saw that as being very trendy, and sort of that was what was getting all the airtime, and still is really getting all the airtime right now. And so I sort of like railed against that a little bit. I have like I can be like a little bit fiery in that way, that I sort of like would be like, well, that's what like you want right now. Like, no, I'm not even going to approach that. But what I like about using all these different materials is that it brings another element that's maybe a little bit more unexpected, or throws an addition, like literally an additional layer of context and meaning to a piece, because once you add a material that's not ceramic to that ceramic piece, then you have to consider all of those other material histories that come with that material as well.
Right, yeah, and there are some pieces that I think that like have very, very, very strong historical narratives that you're talking about that I'd love to touch on in a little bit, but I really love that we're having this conversation right now, because you've also generously offered to give us a demo today, a demonstration of some of your processes. So I thought, we're standing here at this really beautiful table set with a lot of really great materials. Do you want to talk about what you're going to be showing us today and give us a little background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to show you all some of my sort of cold finishes that I do. So I have a couple of things set up here, but I thought first that I would show you some of my textiles. So every ceramics person has like tons of textiles lying around, and mine look maybe a little bit different than some of the more like uniform fired ceramic textiles that people have around. So things first. A lot of the finishes that I do, I consider to be flocking. So flocking is traditionally done with like a soft fabric material, where you lay down some adhesive onto a surface, and then you essentially will like puff very short fibers onto that surface, and so then they lay down evenly into that adhesive, which renders a soft surface. So I'm
going to Vanna White for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So
you
can sort of feel that surface. It's a little bit dirty. It's been hanging around my studio, but you can see it's sort of this like nice fuzzy surface. So that's like what traditional flocking is.
I want to rub it on my face, but I won't.
So this is another sort of version of flocking that's done with a soft material. That's like a turf that you would use to make like dioramas or miniatures, something like that.
It's really funny that you say that. I don't mean to interrupt, but my mom is a really big into making a giant like nativity crush every year, like to the middle of the wall, and she has a ton of flocked like grass as part of her diorama. So like I recognize that immediately, honestly.
Yeah, this is a great material, especially because you can get this in different sizes. So you can get it like really small, like the regular flocking, or a little bit more chunky, like this is
so more like naturalistic.
Yeah, exactly. So you can create that like variation in turf.
Very nostalgic for me.
So that's like what traditional flocking is, and I call things flocking a lot. So whether I'm using like a traditional flocking, or I'm using glass, or I'm using glitter, or silicon carbide, I sort of consider it all flocking, because the process is essentially the same. It's adhesive on a surface, and you're putting a material on top of that adhesive.
Right.
So the effect is like basically the same, just in different materials. So when I was in grad school, I sort of started out trying to do flocking in ceramic materials. This was before I sort of moved to cold finishes, almost exclusively. So these are some sort of sort of flocking with ceramic material. So it's that's a feldspar chunk mix that's flocked onto glaze and then fired on the surface. So it's a fully fired ceramic surface. And so I have these two also are, that has a little bit of glaze on top, and then this one has a layer, it's the same thing, but a layer of borax is then added on top of it as well. So it's forming crystals on top of that. That's actually a granite surface.
So this is our borax on granite.
On granite,
crystals. Yep. And we get that in focus. And then this is our glazed flocking that it has a glazed surface over it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Really interesting, really different effects. This one almost, and I guess maybe there's that like subconscious association with glazing that seems food-like to me.
Yeah, it definitely has
like a shiny chocolate finish.
Like a candied sort of surface.
Forbidden snacks.
So those are actual fired ceramic surfaces, and then I've sort of moved on to other things. So you can have a look at some of these, María-Elisa. So these are glass, so be careful with those. It's glass on silicone.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to bring these over just to try and show you as carefully as I can the backing, the silicone backing here. Are we getting a good view of that? I'm trying not to tip it over too much.
You can tip it. It's not fragile. It's just sharp because it's glass.
And then we'll turn it over so you can get the full of the front. And then, all right. And then that's gorgeous. I'm trying to get the like facets of light because this one especially catches a little bit of green.
I think that might have some glitter mixed in with it as well.
Oh, these are really interesting. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, so these are sort of the textiles that I call them all textiles that I would sort of have hanging around my studio. So you can also see some of these other things that anytime I have like a piece of ceramic that is just a discard, I'll just chunk it up and use it as a tile.
Okay, and so what's this one?
So this one is raw silicon.
Wow.
I got this, apparently this is something they mix into metals at a foundry to help a metal melt more. I don't know the particulars, don't quote me on that, but I sourced that from the foundry at Alfred. And then this one is just glitter.
So here's our silica test tile. Give you a little bit of glitz and glitter by moving it around in the light.
Yeah, that's a really magical material.
Yeah, the way that it catches the light in kind of different colors. Also, just want to show you the back here of this piece. So as Kirstin said, these are all discarded pieces of ceramic that get turned into these really magical test tiles. And we'll just do a quick close-up of glitter because we don't like glitter. And it's also black glitter, so it's kind of spooky for the season. Great. Okay. These are really, really fabulous. I'm having a really good time. I hope y'all are having a really good time.
So there's also a point where I was starting to use these materials as surface treatments where I was thinking, how can I make that material the object itself? So then I have some other test tiles that are sort of to that effect, where I would take, so this is like silicone, for instance, I would take like a cast of the top of a piece, and so that this becomes this silicone object in itself.
So we'll just give quick close-ups of this. So we got the silicone that takes the form of the object, but is not the object, although it is its own object.
It is its own object now. And then this is a little bit squished at this point. This is hair laid down with glue. And this was taken from the same cast as the silicone piece as well. So you can sort of start to see that sort of...
I'm going to be really delicate because it's such a, even that, knowing it came from the same form, it's such an incredibly different visceral and visual moment looking at this and perceiving what it could represent to me. Like, obviously, the hair and the scalp shape makes me very uneasy.
Yeah, it's a little bit freaky. It's very, like, toupee-esque.
Yeah.
Comb-over-esque.
Yeah. A little bit.
So, these are the sort of weird things that I would have in my studio. These are all sort of older test tiles, and this is actually just glue. People who make like the slime glue out of that crystal clear glue. Yeah. It's just that same glue with fake gold leaf. So fake gold leaf is actually made with copper, so that's why this is yellowing and oxidizing. But this is really interesting because you can see it still is like very flexible and has this really interesting quality to it. So
it's also really interesting to look at it because it looks very much like plant matter.
yeah, it absolutely
As
does.
it oxidizes, it gives me a sense of like it's like an aquatic sort of look,
Yeah.
and these are like pond plants.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of just sort of like a petri dish of maybe like bacteria that might be growing. Maybe that's just the shape that it's in.
Well, also because you have like, and I'll just pull this up again, that the color as the gold leaf is oxidizing is bleeding into the glue layer, and so it really is giving that idea of growth and expansion.
Yeah, and this is probably at least a year old at this point, so it's taken quite a while, but it's really interesting to see how these things sort of age, especially working with materials that aren't so like ceramic or fire ceramic is archival. Essentially, it will outlast you by years and years. But when you're starting to work with materials like this, it's sort of nice to have all these tests hanging around so you can see how these materials might age. Because even if materials are labeled archival, it's sort of, if you're adding and changing, you're adding things to that material or you're laying it on top of something, you don't really know how it will react over time.
Right.
So it's a good consideration to keep in mind, especially for art, because you want your art to outlast you, hypothetically, I guess. So some other materials, this is all hair that I've sort of brushed out into a fan and then glued. So I'll glue it down onto like a sheet of plastic and let it dry and then peel it off. And so these are tests for a process like that. So this one has some gold leaf laid over it, and then this one is flocked with a gold mica powder that's made for like cosmetics. So it's like super fine.
Yeah.
Mica cosmetic powder.
The difference between these two gold surfaces is really fascinating. So let me start with the plain one to show the good folks at home very gently. So here it is, the plain. This is the back where you see a little bit of that glue membrane, if that's coming through clearly. And I really love the difference in this very bold, not brassy literally, but this very, very shiny, very yellow, shiny gold on this. And then this huge difference with this lovely mica pigment. Like, it's so, and I'll do side by side, because I've been eyeing these all like day. I'm like, I can't wait to talk about the hair. It's just a really fascinating way that like the same concept is just so radically different based on your material treatments of it.
Absolutely, yeah, and that was the point in the test styles here, because you have this idea in your head and you never know what it actually might look like until you have it on the thing.
So of these, do you have a sense of which one you prefer for the project you're intending them for?
So I like the mica powder quite a bit more for this purpose because it has this radiant quality but it's not outright like reflective or it's not quite as loud. And so I want a little bit more subtle, and I also want to retain that hair grain that's coming through. And it's a little bit, with the gold leaf, it's a little bit messy just because of it's not really adhering to all the hair, and so I want this like full coverage sort of look for it. You know, I may end up just sort of going with just the hair, just to get that hair sheen. You know, I don't want to lose that very apparent hair quality to the piece.
Right.
So those are some test styles, and then also this was sort of a test style. This is really nice to touch. This is just some trimmings of something else that I was working on that I then adhered in sort of this tiered position. So it's also good to like, I keep a lot of materials, and then so I can play around with trimmings, offcasts, things like that.
So this is delightful. I'm going to do it the other way because it's not alive. It can't be mad. I really love that you chose this really, really like round, like you want to, it makes you want to cut it. It's really cool.
Yeah, so again, another piece that got chopped off something else and just reused it. So I've also tried to use some outright building materials. So I use a lot of foundational materials just in form, so like architectural elements, things like that. So I have tried to explore actual building materials to use as surface treatment. So this is I'm going to do a little demo of this as well. This is a joint compound.
Oh, wow.
So it's basically like a plaster material, but you can get these really nice ridges and whatnot on this. And so I've also laid some gold leaf over top of this that adheres just right onto the material. So that's a really nice surface. I've used this a few times before actually, and I'm getting ready to use it for another piece here. And then I'm going to do a demo of this as well. This is actual stucco with like rocks that you would use for stucco on the side of a building. And so since being here in Houston, this is a little bit fragile just because it doesn't have backing. So being here in Houston, there are lots of buildings that have this treatment on the buildings. And so I find it really, really interesting. It's very like, it's like, would it be considered retro, do you think, to use that kind of like surface treatment? Like it feels very like 80s or 90s.
It gives me like a weird like 80s like government structure vibe. That might just be coming from some personal like memories of mine. But I think it's a curious thing that you've noted so many of these types of surface facades in Houston, because as anybody who's lived in Houston long enough knows, there are no rocks in Houston. It's all clay. It's very hard to find a rock in the city because of the way that the just like the composition of the soil is. And so I'm going to be keeping my eye out now more, because I can think of one specifically that definitely was. It got torn down, again, Houston. But I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been living in like a very particular location for the last 2 years, so a lot of things in Houston are just really popping out to me, especially as far as architecture goes.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in this kind of surface, but it's also sort of, you know, if you think about like something like this, it's sort of in the same line as that. So I was gonna do a little bit of demos here for you. So we can start with this sort of like plaster joint compound, I guess, material. So I just broke up this pot that I had laying around, so I'm just going to use that. And this is great because you can just, if you buy the premix, you just use it straight out of the jar. And it's just this nice like pliable material. So I usually only fire my my work to bisque temperature, so to cone 04. So that helps things adhere to the surface because the clay is still a little bit porous. This in particular was fired to cone 5, so it's fired not fully to maturity, but getting there, and it's a lot denser than my bisque is. So usually what I have to worry about with surface treatments like this is like air bubbles coming up through, because there's still air and whatnot in the clay material. So with this, not as much. But this is great because you can sort of just like lay it on in whatever thickness you want. I'd sort of do probably like 1/8 of an inch or so, and you can sort of spread it around and play with it and just get like a really nice like surface. So I usually like to make it just sort of look like you know, those ceilings that have like all the weird like design patterns in them.
Yeah. The popcorn ceiling.
I love popcorn ceiling. I've used popcorn ceiling on work before, but popcorn ceiling is like really bad because of whatever those popcorns are, which used to be asbestos.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are they not still? I hope not.
I don't think they're still. I don't think that would be legal, but I still think maybe there's a little bit of stigma involved in that. So I really like this just sort of basic plastery looking material. I suppose that you could probably do this in plaster itself, but it would have a lot shorter working time. So this is really nice. This dries in about 24 hours, and you can really like rework it.
I like how much texture you can kind of build into it by applying. It's
great. Yeah, I love this a lot, and it's fairly inexpensive. I'm not sure of like the longevity of the surface, but I do have a few pieces that I've done with this that are about 1.5 years old, and they're still beautiful, perfect surface, clean, whatnot. So really, that's all that I would do with that, and then just let it dry and sort of work my way around the piece and sort of finesse the material. So that's really simple, really simple. And if I wanted to do, if I wanted to light in gold leaf, I would just tear up gold leaf and sort of lay it on the surface there, tap it in a little bit, and then just let it dry, and then I can come back and sort of brush it away.
Oh, so this is actually like a subtractive process. So like you had more gold leaf on that surface, and by brushing it away, you ended up with that.
Yeah, so you basically just would only tap it in where you sort of want it to adhere, and then once it dries, you come back and wipe it away. So actually I can do some gold leaf in here. So I prepared this piece just with this gold paint, and it's literally, I've matched this sort of similar to what my gold leaf is.
Okay.
But I just buy this at Walmart.
Can I hold up this in the little chart so folks can kind of see?
Definitely. So when I was in grad school at Alfred, the only thing we had locally was a Lowe's and a Walmart to source materials. So I've been really resourceful with getting paint and supplies from knowing what Walmart carries, which is really unfortunate in a lot of ways, but just was something that I had to do. And so gold leaf, I'm not wealthy, so I use fake gold leaf, especially with the amount of gold leaf that I've used in the past. So I found this gold leaf that's pretty reliable and fairly inexpensive. So if anyone has used gold leaf before, it's very thin, it tears really easily, so I'm like barely holding it right now. And it's actually fairly difficult to work with in the studio because I have this vent that is like constantly circulating air, so you'll probably see this like blow away at some point. But what you would normally do for gold leaf is lay down a base layer that would be it'd be clay based. So it's like
like a clay bowl. Isn't that what it's called? A bowl?
Yeah, it's like a clay ground, and it's sort of like a brick red color.
Right.
And so when you put the gold leaf on top of it, it like really makes the gold leaf pop. So what I normally just do is the gold, just to try to like match it as close as possible, and I just use Mod Podge because it's easy. It's easy to find, and you can tell by my gallon. Is this a gallon? Yeah, my gallon. How much Mod Podge I use in my work that I've bought the big size, the biggest size you can buy actually, I think. So I would just use this and just like lay down glue on the surface, and then tear off some leaf and just like lay it down. It sort of just suctions its way down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
I wonder if on this next piece you could hand it off to me so I could
Sure.
try to let the good folks at home see it as it adheres.
Sure.
We're going to try to do some live action demoing right now, like close up.
Yeah, def. All right.
I'm ready.
All right.
My sports stance. Grabbing and... And I don't know if we can still see it, but we missed it. Okay. But it's adhering. We saw it.
It's adhering.
We can attest to it.
So this is a pretty easy technique. It gets really tricky if you're trying to go around like tight corners, tight elements, things like that. You really have to like get the gold down into particular shapes and sizes and be strategic about it. So once you sort of have your gold leaf on the surface, it's not sort of like totally adhered. There's creases and whatnot you can kind of see. Mm-hmm. So I have these brushes that I've sort of like flattened out a little bit. So what you sort of do is just like tamp down on it.
Oh.
To make sure it's all adhered to the surface.
Okay.
So I'll like go over the gold, go over the creases.
I like the texture that it imparts as well through that process.
So the gold leaf will basically take a lot of the texture of whatever surface it's on. So this ceramic had a lot of sort of dimplings. So you can really see that through the gold leaf here. But this surface is still super fragile. So because that gold leaf is so thin, so if I like touch it and pull a little bit, it will like tear apart.
Okay.
And it's easy, you know, you can just lay more gold leaf over top, but it sort of can be irritating to
to the gold underneath, I should think.
Yeah, it just can be irritating to fix.
Oh, yeah, irritating to the artist.
Yes, irritating to the artist.
So just a little visual of the brush texture that comes onto that through the process of gently tamping. Replacing this.
Yeah. So that's essentially what gold leafing is. It can be like really monotonous and take a long time to do just because of that.
Yeah.
So the same thing with glitter. It's really simple. So I use this, which I got at Hobby Lobby, and just sorry that I went to Hobby Lobby, but
well, we were talking about it earlier.
Necessary evil sometimes.
Yeah, there can be no ethical consumption under capitalism. They say. There are those who say.
Yeah, so I went to Hobby Lobby. I got the glitter at Hobby Lobby also for economy's sake. So this is really simple also. This is, I'm showing all my secrets, but it's like really not a secret. It's just like basic crafting. So I lay down the red on the bottom just in case there are any sort of gaps in the glitter, which there really won't be, but you have to work kind of quickly when you flop something because if you do it in sections, you're going to get, well, in fresco terms, it's called a giornata, but like, so you're going to get that like line.
Is that Italian for holiday? Or
It's
journey?
a day.
Oh.
I believe. No, giorno is day. But giornata is like a day's work.
Oh. So it like takes a day's work to fix it, or?
No, it's just sort of like in like the giornata was like how long it would take, or is like the day's work of how much they could get finished in a day of frescoing. So how much plaster they would lay down to complete in a day.
Right.
So there we go. It's flat.
Gorgeous. All right, we're gonna give you all a close up of the glitter. Gorgeous. I love it, and I love glitter so much. Wow, this is so great. Is there anything else you want to talk about in our demo table? Because I think we've gone through over a lot of really fascinating materials, and I know we're really racing through the hour right now.
Sure, we can move on to some other stuff.
All right, so let's go ahead and do a big set change facilitated live by Catherine, our lovely camera lady, as we move the set. Right. And
Now we're over here.
well, here we are at the other side of the studio. Here on the table with us, we have a lot of interesting materials and objects that Kirstin has generously gathered to share with us. I did have some questions about your art history background because I myself, as you know, as a medievalist in undergrad, am very fascinated by that. But we're kind of running through things, so I just wanted to see maybe if we could tie those conversations together and really reflect some of that in what you were choosing to show to us today.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are two separate projects that I'm working on right now that I've sort of laid out all the materials for, and that's sort of how I work. That I'll start with like what I'm working on and make it in clay, and then I'll sort of be gathering all my other auxiliary materials to sort of complete the piece. And so both of these pieces are sort of based on personal travel experience or research, and so a lot of the content that I work with is sort of based in research or in my past research in some ways. So like, for example, the piece that you're standing beside María-Elisa is obviously like this big vessel jar form that's been coated in these fake red rose petals. And then I have this a canvas bag essentially that's going to form another element to this piece, and it's sort of going to be either a two-part piece or a tripartite piece. But the whole thing is based on this myth of saint. So I'm really interested in sort of like hagiography or saint histories, and being able, or having the fortune, I guess, to be able to travel and see a lot of like relics, reliquaries in person and sort of experience that like cult devotion or cult practices in person. So sort of through my background in art history and researching, I've discovered these weird little elements that provide really interesting fodder for maybe more contemporary interpretations.
Yeah, I find that really fascinating, particularly because, the substance of all of the things, the elements that are making this piece are so much a part of that. The rose petals, the hair, the vessel. I mean, as a lot of these reliquaries they can be quite bizarre for the modern contemporary viewpoint. And I think that reframing it this way is so interesting because they really are just the same visual icons, but you've reorganized them in this really fascinating way.
Yeah.
I just wanted to really quickly I'm really loving the showing up of the closeness, but like these little rose petals are all very delicately creased, and so there's a lot of texture on the piece when you look up close, and there's directionality here, you've got them spinning around, and so can you talk about a little bit what more like these role they're playing? Are they going to be sort of visually near it? Are they going to be attached to it? Will they be inside it?
So they're sort of, it's almost like an assemblage of pieces or sort of like this little installation. So I like to work in threes. So what these two elements here are sort of like two different interpretations of the same sort of like myth or miracle telling. And I like to think that way where if I come up with an idea and like the physical form of something that I try to think how can I say that in a different way, or how can I it's like saying the same thing in just different words, sort of. They're sort of like synonyms. So like this is like the vessel, the head coated in rose petals. This is the head in the bag with rose scent springing from it. And maybe the next interpretation is a red light with rose petals surrounding it, or they're just multiple ways to sort of say the same thing. And so this idea came into my head when I during my first year of grad school, I think maybe about 2 years ago, that it was maybe more interesting if you sort of got to that like third interpretation of what you were trying to say, and sort of how you can unfold that or unpack that content or that information in different ways.
Yeah. I confess, the head in a sack motif really made me think about how much play Judith Slade Holofernes has gotten recently. That its context is so, it's always sort of been there on the underside, like it's sort of a proto-feminist story. It's very much like an emancipatory story in one reading of it, but in this way that like, in a political, societal way, we really have seen it come to the fore. I feel that that's really what I'm seeing you enacting in these. And this feels like it's a specific reference. I'm not saying it's that, but it feels like it's alluding to something without necessarily saying you need to know what it is to understand, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, and that's what I hope, because this particular reference is actually a very particular miracle of St. Catherine of Siena. And I don't expect anyone to understand that reference, but I hope that these objects are interesting enough to provide some sort of intrigue or interest that can, people can interpret in different ways. And certainly, if you want to bring in Judith to that story, that's fantastic, because that's a great character as well. But I like those like different interpretations as well. So I like to leave things a little bit ambiguous or open for interpretation.
Yeah, well, it feels, you get the sense that you're working with a pre-existing vocabulary that even if you don't know it, you sort of recognize that this is a language that you're speaking in. And then, like I said, not having the requirement, the barrier of entry to really experience it is a really interesting way of, like, approaching that. Something that just occurred to me in terms of what your thoughts are on this is actually the smell aspect. I mean, given the age of COVID, how do you see maybe smells playing a role in future works, if at all, or how would you navigate that given the obvious sort of restrictions, sadly?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I would still work towards it. I come up against this as well with sort of like virtual exhibitions, with a lot of work that I've done with light in the past as well, because part of the language of light is not just actually visually saying it, it's sort of that experience of light, and being within a space, and experiencing a very particular type of light. So for example, like raking light is a very particular sort of type of light that you need to experience in person to really appreciate. A setting sun that's really shining a very sharp beam through a light or through a window that's coming and hitting a particular spot on the floor. you need to experience in person, and sort of work that I've done with neon as well as like part of that experience of light. We're creating architectural elements through neon is sort of that translation of that proprioceptive experience of light within a physical space. So you can see that image on the screen, but you're not really getting the full effect because that light isn't encompassing you in the same way that it would if you were physically standing in front of that neon. So, I mean, it's sort of, like it just is what it is right now, and hopefully we will be able to see art in person at one point or another again. But I still think bringing senses into art is really important. It's not just a visual experience. It's sort of like if you want to create an installation, if you want to create like a full body experience, you need to have these other elements. And so that's why I try to bring in more sensory experience like light and smell.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I mean, I know that, earlier, I think the shot may not include it now, but y'all probably saw the neon work. This is like neon, not like an LED appropriation of it, which may not be possible to see given that we're, as you were saying, looking at light through the filter of the web camera that we're using to film this and the filter of your monitor or your phone. And so we are really like degrees removed. So it's interesting to talk about that too, because I know this piece next to you on the table here, you have some thoughts about how you want to develop it and maybe incorporate light and that sort of ambience, but within I'll let you tell us more about this piece. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So I feel a little bit self-conscious showing this piece as it is right now. So I work a lot of the time modularly with ceramics and sort of cold assemble things. If I know I'm going to be doing a cold surface treatment on it. So it makes it a little bit easier, especially if something needs to be assembled very precisely. So this has sort of been glued together right now, but you can see that this piece has a variety of different sort of like holes or ports on it. And those are for specific things. So you mentioned light, so I have all of these little nightlight bulbs, I guess. And so I've picked up these fun red bulbs, which create a really great red light, and so those will sort of illuminate the interior space of this. But that light will also be visible through these sort of like portals on the front here. So I try to incorporate light in like various different ways, so encompassing or very like precise and on the surface.
Awesome. I don't know if it would be too tricky. Is there a way that we could reach one of the plugs over just to see what it looks like illuminated from the inside?
Yeah.
A little unrestricted, so I don't know
if you want to, just pull over the
oh yeah,
board.
Perfect. I think because even from a distance, we might get to see the glow from inside, and I think that would be really interesting to see, even as a in-process moment. Wow!
So those are pretty red.
Yeah, that's really red. Can we see that on the screen, y'all?
The red light, a little bit.
A little bit. Oh yeah, can we? Sure. All right, throw us into darkness. How's that looking, y'all? A little bit better? Well, you'll have to come at the right time when it's finished and see it, but it's interacting really interestingly with the unfinished surface with this sort of clay, plain, fired. Bisque fired, you said it's at right now?
Yep.
So that's an interesting color combo. One other thing that makes me think of, I'm a little too shy. I can't help it because it's partially the season, but the Italianate influences architecturally and the inclusion of red light just makes me really want to watch Suspiria.
Yeah.
So I don't know, if you've seen it, I get very much in mind of that.
That's trippy.
Great movie, amazing soundtrack. Anyway, back on track. I think we might be at the portion of the evening where we are going to ask and check if our sweet audience has any questions for Kirstin about her practice or about anything they'd like to know. Anybody? We got a bunch of shy guys. That's okay. Good comments? Okay. Well, we appreciate the good comments, y'all. Well, we're just hanging out, so I feel like we have a lot that we could talk about. For instance, like, there's a really, and this is also maybe a little far away, so we'll try to get back here so we can kind of get the focus good on the webcam. But I'd love to talk about this in-process piece, if you're comfortable.
Yeah.
Get a sense of kind of how that as well ties in with a lot of these different threads that weave throughout your work as you explore.
Yeah, so this piece was, I sort of started this right before everything shut down with COVID back, at the beginning of 2020, feels like ages ago. And it was originally just supposed to be this sort of like one single light that was sort of parsed up with a wig that was pulled apart by these sort of like chains or restraints that would be part of a larger piece. And so since then I sort of expanded it to include 3, which is really interesting because it creates this sort of like canopy or like a very structured feel to it. So I know we were talking before, María-Elisa, about it sort of referencing this, it's the Madonna of Comfort, which is where the Madonna sort of has her cloak open and is sheltering her people under it, or her followers. And so it sort of has expanded from being this almost like a self-portrait sort of with this like long brown hair to being maybe something else and having an interesting sort of interior space as well that could include other things or shelter things. And so I'm not really attached to how it's displayed or sort of it being on a wall or whatnot right now, but sort of part of my process is leaving things or hanging things up and leaving them around for a long time, which you might notice in my studio, so that I can sort of look at things on the daily and think through them and sort of have develop this like visual vocabulary of what I want to say and how I want to say it through these elements.
Yeah. Just really quickly, since it may not be as clear, as Kirstin was saying, there's a dimensionality. So, for instance, there's an under area here that could have, an item, or it could be installed further. So, I just wanted to kind of make that clear. Do we have an audience question?
We do.
Yay!
What is your favorite medium?
What is your
My
favorite medium?
medium, I think I have to say ceramics. It's really like my foundational material that I've been working in clay for over 10 years now, which is really incredible to say. And I've sort of developed this vocabulary of working with clay, especially on the wheel, that I can use in a variety of different ways. So I have to say ceramics is probably my favorite. But I use so many different materials and techniques that it's really like hard to pin down precise things because it could change from moment to moment.
Fascinating. Anything else from the audience? Well, I wanted to take a really quick moment and see if Catherine could be so kind as to pan just over here, where just off camera, I believe, we have some really wonderful examples of work that Kirstin has been doing while she's been here. So I'm going to really quickly move away. Kirstin, if you want to switch with me,
Sure.
so you can be in the speaker spot and let the kind folks know about these really wonderful pieces that you've created recently.
Yeah, so I've been working on sort of a series of pieces that are utilizing more of like a jar or a vessel base to them. So I have this piece here that was sort of based off of the Dorothy shoes. And so the idea is that this whole piece would sort of become a part of this language of like the gold, or sorry, not the gold, the like the red glittery slippers and whatnot. And so this is sort of on pause right now. It's going to be installed at some point here outside my studio. So y'all can check back in a couple weeks probably until that's installed.
Yeah, very soon. We'll let you know.
And then I have another piece here that I've recently put this clock face on, which is all gold leafed and is really sort of once you approach the piece, you see the movement of the clock hands and whatnot, but it's meant to sort of not be very apparent.
Do you think we could maybe just rotate it a tiny bit so that we could give the folks watching a chance to see the front and get that sort of impression of it?
Sure.
I know it's like a gloved hand thing, so I know,
Yeah.
you know, however you feel safe. We don't have to move it if it
Oh
seems
no,
like
it's
it might
not,
be dicey.
it's not a problem. It's just this gold oxidizes with
Anything.
yeah, with any touch, so it needs to be gloved.
But yeah, as Kirstin turned it, you probably could kind of see that moment when you noticed the clock hands.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really interesting effect.
Yeah. So I'm really curious about this. I'm just going to have it run in my studio for a while, as per usual. And then I have some other things sitting on the table here. So this was another piece that I had started, which is really a rosary, a 5-decade rosary made out of hair, and then assembled together, sort of just utilizing some like jump rings and rudimentary sort of pre-made jewelry aspects. So this piece will eventually sort of have this, if we think about like an actual rosary that has the centerpiece and then the cross coming down, that's what this is missing right now. So eventually it will have something. What it is at the moment, I don't know. Check back later.
I'd love to give people a closer view of
Sure.
the metal fasteners that you've used to
Yeah.
put the hair portions together, because I really think it adds like a really high level of like authenticity to the experience of remaking the rosary with the hair. I really love it. It's so beautiful. So how's our prime audience? Feeling inspired? Y'all, I know it's you know it's that time of the season. You know, we're getting think about Halloween and stuff, but I feel like I don't know. We've covered like a lot of ground today, and we're just kind of walking around the whole area now. Poor Catherine's having to really run after us to get us in the shot. But I just feel like, you know, I don't know. What has been your experience? I guess just like kind of reflecting since you did come while we were still closed, and
Yep.
you know that's been such a weird in between time. We're so grateful that you were, you know, making the most of your time here. We did our best to be present, but you know, what are some reflections you have now that we are open? You're getting to have some interaction with people.
Yeah, it's been great so far. So I haven't had too much interaction besides people sort of ogling me through the window. But I hope that people feel welcome to sort of tap on the glass. Is that bad? And sort of interact with me. I'm happy to chat no matter what I'm doing. I can multitask and work and chat at the same time. And I will be here every Saturday as well with my door open. So please feel free to come chat with me. But it's been really great to be here, and I'm really thankful that Houston Center for Contemporary Craft has been open, at least for residents throughout the pandemic, because we need a place to work and sort of trudge on with our lives and try to rebuild from some of this that's been shut down or canceled due to COVID. So it's been great to be here and sort of have the time, even with the center closed, to be able to work here and just sort of get to chat with y'all that are sort of milling about.
Well, I can say, at least for my part, I know that everybody else feels this way too, though it's really made our time working towards reopening so much richer to have you here and really have that time with you. So thank you again. Please, everybody, do be aware you can come visit us. On Saturdays is when our resident artists do have their open days. To keep in compliance with safe social distancing practices, we will have barriers at the door of each resident studio where you can stand and talk to them. We just please ask, of course, as always, masks, safe distancing to keep our wonderful artists and our staff here safe. But I think unless we have any other audience questions.
We have another question.
We do!
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
What do you do what do you hope to accomplish in your time as a resident? Sorry.
So I'm hoping to build a new body of work. So I'm working a lot faster than I normally would in my studio, which is really great. So I'm hoping to build a new body of work that I can eventually show, or that will go somewhere else out into the world other than just in my studio. And to also to explore some themes that maybe I felt that I couldn't while I was in school, and I sort of had to answer every single question about a work of art. so to sort of like allow myself that freedom is definitely something that I want to be working towards here, which sounds really odd, to be working towards being freer, but it's sort of this continual path of building and growing.
That's great. Oh, another question. Thanks, y'all. Y'all got over the shyness.
Have you thought of teaching some of your art to youth groups or others?
I mean, I'm happy to teach a class if
To the groups of youth.
if someone's interested in what I have to say or what I have to share. Absolutely, yeah.
Normally we would have you.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
kind of
normally
hard.
we would have some things happening, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We do our best to facilitate, workshops, but during the pandemic, a lot has changed, and so I
Mhm.
think just like you, everybody's figuring out a new way to engage in
Right.
pedagogy or just education at any level. So, I think I've definitely learned a lot this evening, and I hope y'all have too. And I think on that note, we're going to go ahead and sign off. We really, again, appreciate your time and your space. It's been such a pleasure. Y'all, we really look forward to seeing you at the next studio session. Stay tuned. Go to crafthouston.org to our events tab to find out more about any upcoming programming. We will see you again. Same craft time, same craft channel. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
For y'all.